Imagine living in a place where a restaurant's logo change sparks louder outrage than children dying in school shootings, where rainbow flags ignite fiercer debates than a president's attempts to rewrite the Constitution. Welcome to the surreal reality of the MAGA movement in 2025, where petty grievances are weaponized in spite of, or is it to drown out, real tragedies. Let's examine the right's obsession with manufactured culture wars, expose their chilling silence on crises that actually matter, and uncover how Trump's cult-like grip is pushing America towards a dangerous edge. Hello, you're listening to Your Neighbor on the Left, the podcast where we talk about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, your host, and today I want to talk about the stark hypocrisy within the MAGA movement and the broader right-wing ecosystem, highlighting how conservatives erupt in fury over trivial culture wars like Cracker Barrel's logo tweak, rainbow flags, or transgender visibility that have zero real impact on everyday lives. Meanwhile, they remain eerily silent or dismissive about genuine crises, including escalating school shootings, constitutional overreaches under Trump's second term, such as attempts to undermine birthright citizenship and court-defying executive orders, and other systemic tragedies like climate disasters and gun violence. But before we get to that, let's look at some hot topics. As I've mentioned before in other episodes of this podcast, we're living in a timeline where science is being casted doubt upon by incredibly unqualified people. And the latest volley from the camp of pseudoscience would be President Donald Trump's recent push for pharmaceutical companies to justify the success of their COVID-19 treatments. On September 1st, Trump took to social media to call out drug companies, demanding they provide clarity on the effectiveness of their COVID drugs and vaccines, even referencing Operation Warp Speed, a hallmark of his first term. This move has sparked heated debates about healthcare policy, government intervention, and the legacy of COVID treatments. So let's talk about what this means, why it's controversial, and what it could signal for the future of healthcare. This isn't just a random comment. It comes at a time when Trump's administration is shaking up things big time. From rescinding Biden-era healthcare policies to freezing COVID-era grants, his team is signaling a shift towards prioritizing what they call America's, quote, chronic disease epidemic, end quote, over pandemic-era measures. But why focus on COVID-19 drugs now, years after the pandemic's peak? And what does this say about government's role in healthcare? To understand this debate, we need to look back at the COVID-19 treatments Trump championed during his first term. Back in 2020, when the pandemic was in full swing, Trump was treated for COVID himself with an experimental antibody cocktail from Regeneron, remdesivir, and dexamethasone. These were cutting edge at the time, but not without controversy. The Regeneron treatment, for example, was only available through compassionate use outside clinical trials, meaning it wasn't widely accessible to the average American. Remdesivir showed modest benefits in shortening hospital stays, but didn't significantly reduce deaths. Dexamethasone, a steroid, proved effective for severe cases, but could be harmful if given too early. Then, of course, there's hydroxychloroquine, which Trump heavily promoted as a game changer in 2020. He even claimed to take it himself as a preventative. But studies, including a large one in The Lancet, a world-renowned, peer-reviewed medical journal in operation since 1823, showed it didn't help COVID patients and was linked to higher death rates and heart issues. This led to the FDA revoking its emergency authorization in July 2025, a move that didn't sit well with some of Trump's supporters. And let's be clear, this is the only opinion that is relevant to Donald Trump. The data is clear. Vaccines developed under Operation Warp Speed saved millions of lives globally. A 2021 study estimated they prevented over 14 million deaths in the first year alone. But Trump's recent comments seem to reopen old wounds, questioning the narrative around these treatment successes. Is he reflecting public skepticism, or is this a strategic move to shift focus? Let's take a look at the policy angle. Trump's call to justify COVID drugs isn't happening in a vacuum. His second term has been a flurry of executive actions aimed at reshaping healthcare. For starters, he's rolled back Biden-era policies like extended ACA enrollment periods and drug pricing experiments through the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. He's also pushed to lower drug prices for Americans by targeting what he calls foreign freeloading, where other countries pay less for drugs developed with U.S. subsidies. In July 2025, he sent letters to major pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and Eli Lilly demanding they align U.S. prices with those in comparable nations. But here's where it gets tricky. Trump's administration has also frozen $11.4 billion in COVID-era grants for addiction and mental health, arguing that the pandemic is over. Critics, like addiction expert Keith Humphreys, warn this could disrupt treatment programs, especially as overdose deaths, though down from their 2023 peak, still exceed 80,000 a year annually. Then there's the push to exit the World Health Organization, citing its handling of COVID and unfair U.S. funding burdens. These moves suggest a broader agenda. Less government spending on pandemic-related programs, more focus on domestic priorities, and a hard line against perceived inefficiencies. The question is, does this reflect a coherent healthcare policy, or is it a reaction to public frustration? Some see it as Trump doubling down on his America First approach, prioritizing U.S. patients and taxpayers. Others argue it risks destabilizing programs that still benefit vulnerable populations. Trump's demand for drug companies to justify their COVID treatments raises a bigger question. How much should the government meddle in healthcare? On one hand, Operation Warp Speed showed that government can really do something when it flexes its muscle, coordinating resources to develop vaccines in record time. But on the other hand, Trump's promotion of unproven treatments like hydroxychloroquine led to a surge in prescriptions, 483,000 more in early 2020 than the previous year, causing shortages for patients with conditions like lupus. Government intervention can accelerate innovation, but it can also distort markets and public trust. When Trump pushed hydroxychloroquine, it wasn't just a policy misstep. It influenced public behavior, with patients demanding the drug from doctors despite shaky evidence. Now, his call for pharmaceutical companies to clear up the mess could pressure firms to release data selectively, potentially undermining the FDA's rigorous approval process. And with figures like RFK Jr., a known vaccine skeptic, reportedly influencing Trump's health policy, there's valid concern about eroding trust in scientific institutions. So, how is the public reacting? Posts on X show a split. Some users praise Trump for questioning Big Pharma, seeing it as a push for transparency. Others call it a distraction, pointing to the proven success of vaccines and the risks of politicizing science again. The debate reflects a broader divide. trust in institutions versus skepticism of corporate and government motives. Looking ahead, Trump's focus on drug pricing and accountability could reshape healthcare policy. His administration's push for most favored nation pricing might lower costs for Americans, but it risks trade tensions if other companies face higher prices. Meanwhile, cuts to programs like PEPFAR, which combats HIV globally, could strain international health efforts. The big question is whether these moves will deliver tangible benefits or deepen distrust in a post-COVID world. Trump's push on COVID drugs isn't just about pills or vaccines. It's about trust, power, and who gets to shape America's healthcare future. Whether you see him as a disruptor, challenging Big Pharma, or as a leader stirring up settled science, one thing's clear: this debate isn't going away. As we move forward, we'll be watching how these policies play out on drug prices, public health, and the role of government in our lives. On August 28th, Donald Trump revoked former Vice President Kamala Harris's Secret Service protection just 7 months after she left office. On one hand, this decision reeks of vindictiveness and fits perfectly with Trump's well-documented thin skin. But how does it really compare to historical Secret Service protection for other vice presidents? And what does it say about Trump's approach to power? So let's start with the facts. Federal law, passed in 2008, grants former vice presidents Secret Service protection for 6 months after leaving office, along with their spouses and children under 16. For Kamala Harris, that period ended on July 21st, 6 months after her term ended. But here's the thing. Before leaving office, President Joe Biden quietly signed a directive extending Harris's protection for an additional year until July 20th, 2026, due to her heightened threat profile as the first woman and first Black and South Asian vice president, not to mention her role as Trump's 2024 election rival. Trump, in a memorandum dated August 28th, ordered the Secret Service to discontinue any security-related procedures beyond those required by law for Harris. This is to be effective September 1st. This move yanked her protection just as she's about to embark on a 15-city book tour for her memoir, 107 Days, detailing her 2024 presidential campaign. Now, some people are accusing the president of pettiness. First, there's the timing. Harris is gearing up for a high-profile public tour where she'll be exposed to crowds in cities like LA, London, and Toronto. Stripping her security now isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially dangerous. Harris faced documented threats during her vice presidency, including a 2021 case where a Florida woman pleaded guilty to sending videos threatening a hit on her, and a 2024 arrest of a man threatening to kill her with a sniper rifle. As the first woman and person of color in her role, her threat level was elevated, a fact acknowledged by Biden's extension. Trump's decision ignores this reality, seemingly driven by personal animus from their bitter 2024 campaign, where he called her radical and leaned into the anti-black tropes. California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass called it out as an act of revenge, part of Trump's normal pattern of targeting adversaries. This isn't just about Harris. Trump's been on a spree revoking protection for others who crossed him. Since taking office in January 2025, he's cut security for John Bolton, his former national security advisor, Mike Pompeo, his former Secretary of State, and even Hunter and Ashley Biden, Joe Biden's adult children, who also had extended protection. Bolton and Pompeo faced threats from Iran, yet Trump pulled their details away. This pattern screams thin skin. Trump can't handle criticism or rivalry, so he wields security details as a political weapon, a move with no modern precedent. It's petty because it prioritizes personal grudges over public safety, especially when the Secret Service itself didn't flag Harris as a low-threat individual. But let's take a look at history. Has this happened before? Historically, Secret Service protection for former vice presidents has been a case-by-case deal. A 2008 law formalized the 6-month rule, but extensions aren't unheard of when threats persist. Dick Cheney, vice president under George W. Bush, is a rare example of someone who got extended protection. In 2009, President Barack Obama approved continued Secret Service coverage for Cheney beyond the 6 months, citing his high-profile role and ongoing threats. Mike Pence, Trump's own VP from his first term, didn't receive an extension beyond the standard 6 months after January 2021, though no specific threat data is public for him. Other recent VPs, like Al Gore or Joe Biden as VP, don't have documented extensions, but the threat environment has grown more volatile since their tenures, especially post-2020. What is unique here is Trump's proactive revocation of an existing extension, something even security experts call out as unusual and risky in today's polarized climate. Why does it matter? It's not just about Harris's safety, it's about what this says about Trump. His thin skin has been evident since his first term. Think of his Twitter rants against critics, his obsession with loyalty, his pardoning of January 6 rioters who attacked the Capitol. Revoking Harris's protection is a power flex, a way to humiliate a rival who dared challenge him. It's petty because it serves no practical purpose. Harris's detail wasn't straining Secret Service resources, and her book tour would have been manageable. Some Republicans, like Senators Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton, urged Trump to reconsider, but he's doubling down. This move risks escalating political violence by signaling that security is a privilege to be revoked at Trump's whim, not a necessity for public figures in a tense climate where Trump himself faced 2 assassination attempts in 2024. Zooming out, this fits Trump's broader pattern of vengeance. He's fired officials like Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook over fraud allegations and targeted others like John Bolton in a classified documents probe. X posts from users like community organizer Tanisha Long highlight the outrage, accusing Trump of creating a lynch mob by fueling division and then stripping protections. California's stepping in. Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass are coordinating with the California Highway Patrol to protect Harris, but private security could cost millions, a burden she shouldn't have to bear. To wrap up, Trump's revocation of Harris's Secret Service protection is a textbook case of pettiness, driven by his thin skin and a need to settle scores. Historically, extensions like Cheney show that protecting high-profile figures is not just routine, it's prudent. By targeting Harris, Trump's not just endangering her, but setting a dangerous precedent in a polarized nation. It's a small move with big implications, showing how personal grudges can override common sense. In a story that smacks of the old everything old is new again thing, there is concern about a possible federal shutdown coming on September 30th, when current federal funding is set to expire. With just weeks to go, the clock is ticking, and the path to a resolution is anything but certain. Now, to set the stage, a government shutdown happens when Congress fails to pass and the president fails to sign the appropriations bills needed to fund federal agencies for the new fiscal year, which starts October 1st. Without funding, non-essential government operations grind to a halt. We're talking about national parks closing, federal workers furloughed, and critical services like food inspection or loan processing delayed. Essential workers, like air traffic controllers, TSA agents, military personnel, do keep working, but without pay, until funding is restored. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a shutdown could furlough nearly 900,000 federal workers and leave over 1.4 million essential employees working for free. That's a massive disruption not just for those workers, but for the millions of Americans who rely on government services. The current funding, extended through a continuing resolution, or CR, passed in March of 2025, runs out on September 30th. Congress needs to either pass a new CR to keep funding at current levels or approve the full set of 12 appropriation bills for fiscal year 2026. Sounds simple, right? Not so fast. As of now, the House has only passed 2 of those 12 bills, and the Senate hasn't passed any. That's a big red flag. And with only 20 working days left, the timeline is brutally tight. So, why are we staring down the barrel of another potential shutdown? The first hurdle is good old-fashioned partisan gridlock. Republicans control the White House, the House, and the Senate, but their majorities are razor thin, especially in the House, where Speaker Mike Johnson can afford to lose only one single Republican vote. This narrow margin means even a single defector, like Representative Thomas Massie, who's already signaled he might vote against a clean CR, could tank the deal. On the other side of the aisle, Democrats are furious about recent Republican moves, particularly a $9 billion rescissions package that clawed back previously approved bipartisan spending. This has shattered trust, with prominent Democrats like Senator Elizabeth Warren warning that cooperation on funding is at risk. Democrats also worry that a CR, which lacks specific spending directives, gives President Trump and his Department of Government Efficiency too much leeway to redirect funds as they see fit. This fear is amplified by Trump's history of embracing shutdowns as a political tool, like the 35-day shutdown in 2018 to 2019, the longest in U.S. history. Timing is another huge issue. Congress returns from its August recess on September 2nd, leaving just 20 working days before the deadline. August is typically a time for lawmakers to hammer out deals, but with the recess eating up that window, we're in a pressure cooker. The House and Senate need to draft, negotiate, and pass either a CR or the full appropriations bills, and both chambers are moving at different speeds. The Senate's bills have bipartisan support, but the House's are passing on party line votes, making compromise tricky. President Trump's influence looms large. His budget proposals call for a massive overhaul of spending, more for defense and border security, less for health, less for education, less for housing, and less for foreign aid. This shift clashes with Democratic priorities, and even some Republicans are uneasy about cuts to non-defense programs. Trump's willingness to let a shutdown happen, combined with his budget director's push for more partisan funding process, undermines the bipartisan tradition of appropriations. His recent executive actions, like funding freezes, have also raised concerns among grantees who are advised to stay in close contact with their program officers. Now let's talk about the distractions pulling focus from the funding fight. September 2025 is shaping up to be a chaotic month in Washington, with several high-profile issues competing for lawmakers' attention. One major distraction is Trump's push for steep tariffs on Russia's trading partners to pressure Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. Senator Lindsey Graham is championing a bipartisan sanctions bill with 85 senators' support, but Trump hasn't endorsed it yet. This debate could eat up valuable Senate floor time, especially since it's tied to international diplomacy and recent meetings with Putin and Ukraine President Zelensky. In the House, Republicans are continuing investigations into former President Joe Biden and pushing for the release of more files related to Jeffrey Epstein. These probes, while politically charged, are divisive within the Republican conference and could derail focus on funding. Speaker Johnson is also navigating internal party splits, with the Freedom Caucus demanding stricter spending cuts. The Department of Government Efficiency is another wild card. DOGE's cost-cutting efforts, including proposed federal workforce reductions and telework monitoring, are still stirring controversy. Bills like Senator Joni Ernst to relocate SBA employees and monitor computer usage are gaining traction, but drawing Democratic ire. These reforms could complicate negotiations as Democrats see them as a tax on federal workers and programs like Social Security. Adding to the chaos, federal and National Guard troops are patrolling the Capitol in response to recent security concerns, which actually amount more or less to political posturing. This unusual presence could heighten tensions and distract from legislative priorities. If Congress misses the September 30th deadline, the fallout could be significant. Let's look at some potential impacts. As I mentioned, nearly 900,000 workers could be furloughed and 1.4 million essential employees would work without pay. Services like SNAP benefits could be disrupted, and programs like WIC could run out of funding very quickly, affecting low-income families. National parks and museums would close, impacting tourism and local economies. Now, the 2013 shutdown cost the economy $24 billion and shaved 0.6% off of GDP growth. Economist Gregory Dacko estimates each week of a shutdown could cost $6 billion. With markets already jittery over tariffs and deficits, a shutdown could amplify economic concern. Federal grants, especially for research, could face delays or suspensions. Agencies like the NIH might pause clinical trials, and universities like MIT and UW are already preparing for disruptions. Both parties risk political fallout. Democrats could be blamed for obstructing, while Republicans might take heat for pushing unpopular cuts. Trump's willingness to embrace a shutdown could make him a lightning rod for criticism, but he's banking on it rallying his base, and honestly, he's probably not wrong. Despite the gloom, there's still a chance to avoid a shutdown. A clean CR, which funds the government at current levels through September 30th, 2026, is most likely the path forward. House Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump have signaled support for this, but it needs near-unanimous Republican unity and some Democratic votes to pass the Senate's 60-vote threshold. Democrats wary of a shutdown might hold their noses and vote for a CR, especially if it includes concessions like disaster relief funds. However, the longer negotiations drag, the higher the risk. If talks collapse, we could see a repeat of the 2018-19 shutdown, with airports disrupted, federal workers turning to food pantries, and public frustration boiling over. The key will be whether leaders like Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune can bridge a gap between their party's hardliners and Democrats desperate to protect social programs. Government shutdowns aren't just about funding. They're about trust, or the lack of it, between parties, branches, and even within Congress itself. The September 30th deadline is a test of whether Washington can still do its most basic job: keep the government running. I had to throw in a fourth hot topic this week because this is one that's got social media buzzing, headlines screaming, and conspiracy theories running wild. Exactly where is President Donald Trump? Over the past week, the 45th and now 47th President of the United States has been conspicuously absent from public view, sparking rampant speculation about his health, his whereabouts, in some cases even his survival. From trending hashtags like "Where is Trump?" and "Trump is dead" to viral photos raising more questions than answers, let's talk about what's going on. We'll start with the timeline. According to multiple sources, including the Economic Times and the Hindustan Times, President Trump was last seen in public on August 26 during a 3-hour televised cabinet meeting at the White House. He was joined by administration officials, and the event was described as a showcase of his leadership. 2 days earlier, on August 24th, he made a surprise appearance at Trump National Golf Club in Virginia with former MLB pitcher Roger Clemens. Birds of a feather. Since then, darkness and crickets. No public events, no press conferences, no spontaneous remarks to reporters, nothing. Official White House records show no scheduled appearances for the weekend of August 29th through 31st, which is unusual for a president known for his love of the spotlight. For a man who's built a brand on constant visibility, the silence is deafening. Social media, particularly X, has exploded with speculation. Hashtags like the ones I mentioned before have racked up millions of engagements, with users posting everything from genuine concern to wild conspiracy theories. Some claim he's hiding a serious illness. Others suggest he's taking a break to prep for a major announcement. And a few even allege, without any evidence, that he's no longer with us at all. The White House has stayed tight-lipped, redirecting questions to statements from Trump's physician and allies. And this only fuels the fire. So what's driving this frenzy? At 79, Donald Trump is the oldest person to assume the presidency, a fact that's kept his health under a microscope since his first term. Back in April 2025, his physician, Dr. Sean Barbabella, released a report stating Trump was fully fit to execute the duties of commander-in-chief and exhibited, quote, excellent cognitive and physical health, end quote, after a comprehensive physical. Fast forward to July, and the White House confirmed a diagnosis of chronic venous insufficiency, or CVI, a condition causing blood to pool in the legs, leading to swelling and discoloration. Dr. Barbabella called it benign and common, especially to those over 70, and insisted it doesn't impact Trump's ability to serve. But many in the public aren't buying it, at least not entirely. Photos from late July and August showing Trump with swollen ankles and bruises on his hands have circulated. One image from August 25th, taken during a meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, clearly shows a dark bruise on Trump's right hand. The White House attributed it to minor soft tissue irritation from frequent handshaking and aspirin use. For cardiovascular health, I'm sure. White House Press Secretary and bastion of fortitude, Caroline Leavitt, doubled down, saying, President Trump shakes more hands than any president in history. His commitment is unwavering. Because everything is a competition. Okay, fair enough. Handshaking's part of the job. But then came reports of Trump's struggling to walk in a straight line after stepping off Air Force One, and social media posts noting he's been sitting behind desks during appearances, possibly to hide his swelling ankles. These observations, combined with his recent absence, have people questioning whether the White House is downplaying something more serious. Adding fuel to the fire, Vice President J.D. Vance, home from one of his many vacations, made comments in the USA Today on August 29th that raised eyebrows. He said Trump is in great health and remarkably energetic, but added, if, God forbid, there's a terrible tragedy, I can't think of a better on-the-job training than what I've gotten over the past 200 days. Yikes. Talk about bad timing. Vance's remarks, we assume meant to reassure, instead sparked theories about whether he's preparing to step in. Social media users pointed out that Trump survived 2 assassination attempts, wink wink, during his campaign last year. So the tragedy comment hit a nerve. Is Vance hinting at something the public doesn't know? Probably not, but in the absence of clear answers, speculations run wild. And then there's the photos. The so-called proof that Trump is fine. On August 30th, after days of absence, Trump was photographed heading to Trump National Golf Club in Virginia with his granddaughter, Kai Trump. The image, captured by a pool photographer and reported by People in Newsweek, showed him in a black windbreaker, black pants, and red MAGA hat, looking ready for a day on the golf course. The White House and Trump's allies pointed to this as evidence he's alive and well. Problem is, some eagle-eyed ex-users noticed inconsistencies. For one, the photos didn't definitively prove it was taken that day. It could have been an older image repurposed to quiet the rumors. Then on August 31st, Trump posted on Truth Social, "Never felt better in my life," alongside a claim that Washington, D.C. is now crime-free. The next day, he shared a photo of himself golfing with former football coach John Gruden, captioned, "Great playing golf with John Gruden, a really nice guy and a true character." But here's the kicker. X-users, including retired Navy intelligence officer Travis Akers, pointed out the photo was from August 23rd, a week earlier. Akers wrote, "If you're fighting off rumors of major medical episodes, posting a week-old photo isn't the way to provide proof of life." Youch. The post sparked a wave of comments questioning whether Trump's team is trying to mislead the public about his current condition. This isn't the first time photos have stirred controversy. In late July, images surfaced showing Trump with what looks like heavy concealer on his hands, possibly to cover bruises. The Irish Star ran a story with 11 images highlighting Trump's health concerns, including shots of his swollen ankles and his erratic walking. Some speculated the concealer was to hide evidence of IV treatments, though medical experts suggest the bruises could simply be from cannula insertion or aspirin's blood-thinning effects. Still, the idea that Trump's team might be using makeup or old photos to mask health issues has people wondering, what are we not being told? Now, as we all know, social media is a double-edged sword, and nowhere more than in situations like this. On one hand, it's a platform for real-time updates and public sentiment. On the other, it's a breeding ground for misinformation. The hashtag Trump is dead trended with over 1.3 million engagements. This is according to Grok, X's AI chatbot. Users shared memes, fake news screenshots, and even a viral video claiming The Simpsons predicted Trump's death in August 2025. The clip shows a Trump-like character collapsing from chest pain during a White House address, with narration calling it a disturbing prediction. Fact-checkers quickly debunked it, noting no such episode exists, but the damage was done, the rumor mill was churning. What's fascinating is how polarized the reactions are. Trump supporters, like those on accounts such as MAGA Voice, dismissed the rumors as liberal nonsense, pointing to his Truth Social activity as proof he's fine, because, I assume, @MAGA Voice doesn't grasp how social media really works and that anyone could be posting on his account. Meanwhile, critics like @HalfwayPost have published unverified claims suggesting Trump has 6 to 12 months to live based on his bruises and swelling. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Trump's dealing with age-related health issues, but there's no credible evidence he's on death's door. The White House's lack of transparency, especially since touting themselves as the most transparent administration in the history of the country, coupled with selective photo releases, doesn't help. Compare this to past presidents like FDR or JFK, whose health issues were tightly guarded. Are we seeing a modern version of that secrecy, or is this just a slow news week blown out of proportion? So where do we go from here? Trump's supposed reappearance on August 30th at the golf course suggests he's still active, but the lack of scheduled events and reliance on old photos keeps questions alive. The White House could squash the rumors with a simple press conference or a new time-stamped video of Trump addressing the nation. Until then, every bruise, every step, every Truth Social post will be scrutinized. This saga also highlights a broader issue: the public's right to know about their leader's health. Trump's not just a president, he's a symbol, for better or worse, of resilience for some and controversy for others. His health, or lack thereof, affects global markets, geopolitics, and domestic stability. If he's managing CVI or some other condition, that's his business up to a point. But when the commander-in-chief goes quiet, especially one as normally loud as this one, the world takes notice. And when the White House leans on vague statements and questionable photos, it invites distrust. So that brings us to our main topic of the episode. Today, we're revisiting and expanding on a topic that is as frustrating as it is grotesquely fascinating. The way the right, particularly the MAGA crowd, seems laser focused on getting outraged about absolute nonsense, while turning a blind eye to genuine tragedies and crises. We're talking about things like the logo change at Cracker Barrel, or rainbow flags that spark full-blown meltdowns, versus school shootings or constitutional overreaches that barely register a shrug. With Donald Trump back in the White House since January 2025, this pattern hasn't just continued, it's intensified. I want to unpack that dichotomy, explore how the right has morphed into something even more cult-like during Trump's second term, why manufactured outrage is the fuel of choice for conservative talking heads, and what it all means for the MAGA movement and our country at large. So let's get into it. First off, if you've been paying attention to politics over the last decade or so, and especially since Trump's return to office in 2025, you've probably noticed this stark pattern. On one side, you've got these flare-ups of fury over what can only be described as trivial cultural tweaks, things that don't affect anyone's daily life in a meaningful way. On the other hand, real-world horrors like mass violence or erosion of democratic norms get dismissed, downplayed, or outright ignored. It's like living in two parallel realities. And folks, this isn't accidental. It's a strategy that's been honed to perfection, now amplified under Trump's second administration. So let's begin with the nonsense outrages. These are stories that dominate conservative media cycles, whipping up anger over symbols, brands, or minor social changes. Take the recent Cracker Barrel logo redesign. In August 2025, the chain unveiled a simplified logo, and conservatives lost their minds, accusing the company of going woke and abandoning its values. Donald Trump Jr. and others called for boycotts, claiming it was part of some liberal agenda. The company even took down its Pride page amid the backlash. MSNBC's Jonathan Capehart called it manufactured BS. And honestly, I totally agree. These folks were more upset about a restaurant sign than almost any actual issue. Social media was flooded with posts like the one from a MAGA user raging about it while ignoring bigger problems. But of course, that's only the tip of the iceberg. Remember the Bud Light boycott in 2023? The company sent a single customized can to transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, and MAGA exploded, shooting up cases of beer, calling for the company's downfall. Kid Rock literally filmed himself blasting cans with the semi-automatic rifle. Sales tanked temporarily, all over one can. And it was a can that wasn't even for sale. And then, of course, there's rainbow flags. Conservatives had thrown tantrums over pride symbols, like a proposed flag design no one was even using, labeling it as an attack on traditional values. Ex-posts from conservative accounts amplify this. with queries pulling up outrage over woke pride months or flags. There are many examples of this that I could use, but let's dive deeper into why these fake outrages, especially around trans people and LGBTQ plus rights, have virtually zero effect on the people raging about them. Take transgender bathroom bills. Conservatives claim they're protecting women and children, but studies show no increase in assaults in areas where a trans person has the ability to choose whichever bathroom they want. Predators don't wait for laws to commit crimes. Bans on trans athletes in sports, they affect a tiny fraction. Less than 1% of high school athletes are trans and don't impact cisgender competitors' opportunities in any measurable way. Pride flags or inclusive commercials, they don't change your taxes, they don't change your job or your family life. They're just symbols of acceptance that conservatives frame as existential threats. Yet the rage machine churns on, distracting from real harms like economic equality, healthcare access, which actually affect everyone's wallet and well-being. Here's some more examples. The right freaked out over Canada's passport redesign in 2023, calling it culture chaos when historical images were updated. There was rage over Michelle Obama's push for healthier school lunches. MAGA called it government overreach, although apparently their meter for that particular sin has grown a lot tougher to register on these days. New York limiting soda sizes, outrage. Phasing out trans fats, cries of free market violations. Interracial families in commercials. Taylor Swift at a football game. Male cheerleaders, fluoride in water. All these things and so many more have sparked MAGA meltdowns. There was even a story about a comedian who wore a parody t-shirt that said, "My first knife fight." And it sparked more conservative anger on social media than actual knife or gun violence statistics, with posts decrying it as promoting violence while ignoring real tragedies. In context, it was a humorous retro-style shirt meant for dark comedy fans, but right-wing commenters twisted it into a symbol of societal decay, demanding boycotts, yet they stay silent on policies that could actually prevent harm. Now, fast forward to 2024-2025. Republicans manufactured crises around the debt ceiling, critical race theory in schools, and even Project 2025, which Democrats portrayed as a radical plan, but conservatives defended as policy ideas. Yet the outrage cycle just keeps on spinning. Right-wing activists raged at their own Florida GOP in 2025 over perceived betrayals, showing internal manufactured fury. These aren't isolated. They're a pattern of focusing on symbols to stoke division, with zero tangible impact on the lives of the ragers. Now put that in contrast with how the right responds, or doesn't, to real tragedies. School shootings are a prime example. After the Uvalde shooting in 2022, conservatives blamed everything from woke social emotional learning programs to mental health, but resisted gun control. Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett said after a 2023 shooting, "We're not gonna fix it," dismissing reforms of any kind. J.D. Vance called school shootings a fact of life, pushing for more security instead of laws. In 2025 alone, there have been up to 146 school shootings, depending on exactly how you define it, including the tragic Minneapolis incident that I spoke about in the last episode, where 2 children were killed at a Catholic church. Experts warn of growing radicalization patterns among youth tied to far-right online networks. Yet conservatives blame everything but the guns, ignoring that right-wing extremists commit 75% of such killings. Republicans block reforms like background checks even as Trump rolls back gun safety regs. And if they can't manage to work up any sort of emotion or anguish over school shootings, you know that constitutional violations barely even register. With Trump back in office, 2025 has seen a surge of them. He issued an executive order attempting to end birthright citizenship, violating the 14th Amendment. Another suspended asylum at the border, defying existing laws and court orders. The administration has violated court orders on funding, federalized the National Guard over state objections, fired labor officials over weak job reports, and ordered criminal probes into past opponents, acts sparking lawsuits and crisis talks. These build on past issues like family separations and election interference, now escalating with the targeted executive orders against law firms. Ex-post show conservatives downplaying these while raging elsewhere. Other tragedies, like climate disasters, MAGA blames conspiracies. Opioid crises, ignored in favor of culture wars. This brings us to how the right has become increasingly cult-like since Trump's first term, and even more so in his second. Analysts describe Trump's hold as cult-like control, with loyalty tests and purging dissenters. In 2025, psychologists warn of Trump derangement syndrome, flipping to the MAGA hysteria with supporters in denial over Epstein ties and policy failures. Now, if you spend any time on social media, you'll know that MAGA has tried to turn Trump derangement syndrome into a title that they can hurl at anyone who disagrees with him. But let it be known that it started off as describing MAGA behavior. The party has shifted to personality over policy, and that's before you even start to consider the folks on the right who still subscribe to QAnon. Now, fractures cling to Trump narrative, rejecting facts, constant anger, and reality rejection. So what's the point of focus on manufactured outrage? Goading by Fox, highlighting resentment to hook viewers, outrage addiction mobilizes MAGA users, but also fatigues. It's profitable, sells ads, gets donations, and then real problems are sidelined because they don't fit in the us versus them category. Real tragedies represent systemic failures. Guns kill, constitutions erode and damage democracy. MAGA ignores because admitting flaws challenges the ideology. The right has taken advantage of working class anger and channeled it into these fake wars about unimportant issues. And when I say unimportant, I mean unimportant to the people who are raging about them. Trump wants everyone to have a vehicle for rage, but he doesn't want that vehicle taking them to a place where the real problems actually are. The more that folks can be focused on these invented tragedies, these invented issues, the less time they'll spend talking or demanding answers to the real issues. But make no mistake about it, the fake problems and the real problems are connected in one major way. The fake problems are put forth to distract attention away from the real problems. The more that someone is upset about the Cracker Barrel logo, the less upset they're going to be about Trump's latest executive order that bucks against constitutionality. The more someone's upset about the appearance of a rainbow in an NFL broadcast, the less they're going to focus on. Anyway, to wrap up, this dichotomy is not accidental. It is designed, and it is dangerous. Fixating on nonsense distracts from the fixes. And moreover, giving people nonsensical topics to debate about only drives further wedges between the left and the right. So what do? My best advice is to ignore the nonsense. When somebody rants and raves about something as asinine as a logo change or a rainbow in the wrong place, don't take the bait. Give it all the attention it deserves, which is none. Don't get sucked into an argument about nonsense. Stay focused on the issues that actually matter. And now for the high note. This week's high note deals with a small pizza shop in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, that's making a big difference. When Chris Kolstad, owner of Pizza Man, noticed people digging through his dumpster for food, he decided not to turn away. He took action. Picture this. It's a regular day at Pizza Man, a beloved pizzeria in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, just north of Minneapolis. Chris Kolstad, the owner since 2019, notices something troubling. More and more people are rummaging through the dumpster behind his shop, scavenging for discarded pizza. Empty water bottles, used napkins, pizza boxes litter the area. Clear signs of desperation. Instead of ignoring it, or, more likely these days, putting up a sign that said no trespassing, Chris does something extraordinary. On July 29th, 2025, he posts on Facebook pleading, "Please do not eat out of our dumpster. Nobody deserves that. If you're desperate for food, please come and ask." And it wasn't just a feel-good post. Chris offered a practical solution. If you're too embarrassed to ask in person, call, leave a note, and he'd leave a small cheese pizza out back, no questions asked, no face-to-face needed. He even suggested leaving extras or mistake orders for those in need. This simple act of compassion struck a chord. The post went viral, shared over 1,000 times, and the community rallied. Local businesses like Nazi's Grill chipped in, and donations poured in, over $4,000 by early August, through a Venmo link Chris shared. But it didn't stop there. Chris directed some of that generosity to Southern Anoka Community Assistance, or SACA, a local food shelf that's been serving the area for nearly 50 years. SACA's seen a 52% spike in demand since 2020, helping over 68,000 people in 2024 alone, 35% of them children. They're on track to break that record this year, as food costs rise. Chris's efforts gave SACA a boost, showing how one person's kindness can ripple outward. What makes this story so powerful is its humanity. Chris told Today.com he's been lucky never to face food insecurity himself, but he's worked with those who have. "I can't sit in a building full of food and watch somebody starving in my parking lot," Chris said. And that line hits hard. It's not just about pizza. It's about dignity. One woman with a large family left an anonymous note thanking Pizza Man for helping when they were struggling. And Chris shared it online, saying, "This is why we do what we do." He estimates he's helped nearly 100 people directly with free pizzas since his post. This isn't new for Chris. His shop, named the 2024 Business of the Year by the Columbia Heights Economic Development Authority, has a history of giving back. Fundraisers, charity work, free food events since the pandemic hit. When his business nearly closed in 2023, the community saved it with a surge of support. Now he's paying it forward, proving that small businesses can be more than profit machines. they can be lifelines. In a world where we're bombarded with division, Chris Kolstad reminds us that compassion can cut through the noise. Food insecurity isn't just a statistic. 68,000 people helped by SACA last year, with kids making up a third of that number. That's real. It's local, and it's growing. But so is the power of community. Chris's story shows that one person, one pizza, one post can spark change. If you happen to be in the Columbia Heights area and listening to the sound of my voice, swing by Pizza Man at 4045 Central Avenue, Northeast. Or better yet, support your local food shelf. Let's try and keep Chris's kindness going. And that brings this episode of Your Neighbor on the Left to a close. As always, I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to download and listen to what I have to say. I'm always anxious to hear feedback, whether you do it through our social media platforms, the links of which are on our Linktree page, and that address is in the episode description. You can also contact the podcast via email at neighborotleftpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back on Friday with another episode of Back Porch Files. So until then, stay serious, stay engaged, stay kind, and as always, have the week you voted for.